The doors of the Oak Ridge Police Department didn't just open. They exploded inward like fate itself had kicked them down. Standing in the frame was a dog. Not just any dog, a German shepherd, soaked in mud, streaked with blood, panting like he'd run through hell and come out fighting. Strapped to his back with torn fabric was the limp, lifeless body of a child. A little boy, 8 years old, face pale, arms dangling, blood matted in his blonde hair. Time stopped. Jesus, deputy, Larson breathed, bolting from behind the front desk. The dog growled, a low, broken snarl. Even now, on the brink of collapse, he guarded the boy like his soul depended on it. Sheriff Mason Cooper rose from his chair, heart dropping to the floor. His voice cracked. "That's Ethan Mitchell." Larson froze. "The boy who's been missing 3 days?" Cooper nodded, staring at the child in stunned silence. "And the dog, that's Coda." Before anyone could process it, paramedics rushed in. They dropped to their knees, cutting Ethan loose from the makeshift harness, as gently as they could. The German shepherd didn't move an inch. His amber eyes never left the boy's face. Blood began to pool around Coda's paws. One of the medics looked up. "He's been shot, twice." Still, the dog stayed on his feet. Still, he didn't let go. Not until a woman in a wet black suit stepped through the doors, brushing off her FBI windbreaker, Agent Cassidy Reynolds. She took one look at the scene and whispered, "He's not just trying to save the boy. He's trying to tell us something." Coda stumbled to his feet, trembling, bleeding, barely conscious. Then he turned toward the door and looked back, eyes sharp, filled with something unmistakable. "Follow me." Coda wasn't just a dog. Not to the Mitchells, not to Oak Ridge, not to anyone who remembered what that family had survived. 3 years ago, Coda had been rescued from a shelter on the outskirts of town. He was a scarred, silent German shepherd with a half-bitten ear and a look in his eyes like he'd already seen war. They said he was 5, but Jack Mitchell, former Marine and Ethan's father, knew a fighter when he saw one. Coda looked ancient. Jack didn't want him, didn't want anything. His wife Sarah had been murdered inside their home. Jack had sunk into grief like it was quicksand. He went from war hero to local ghost, drinking too much, talking too little. He gave up everything that mattered, including Coda, who had been Sarah's dog. But Ethan refused to leave the shelter without him. He walked past all the puppies and sat in front of that battered shepherd like they were old friends. "This one," he said. "His eyes are sad like mine." So Coda came home, and he never left. Again. For 3 years, Coda never left Ethan's side. He sat at the foot of his bed. He followed him to school. He waited outside the bathroom like a shadow. The two were inseparable. And Jack? He barely noticed. Coda was a living memory of Sarah, a constant reminder of what he'd lost. He didn't see what Ethan saw, not until the day his son disappeared. That morning had been painfully normal. Cereal bowls, backpacks, running late. Jack had kissed Ethan. On the forehead muttered, "See you at 3, and driven off, Coda riding in the back of the truck, tail thumping, eyes locked on the boy. Ethan waved goodbye. It was the last time anyone saw him. At 3:15, Jack pulled into the school parking. Lot empty. He was picked up early, the school secretary told him. Family emergency. Jack felt the ground tilt beneath him. There was no emergency, and no one else was supposed to pick him up. By 5, Sheriff Cooper had mobilized every available unit. By 9, the FBI was on scene. And Coda? Coda went insane. He paced the house. He barked. He howled. He clawed at the door, nose aimed at the woods behind the school. "He's picking up on something," Agent Reynolds said, but Cooper dismissed her. "We've got trained K9s. We don't need a PTSD shelter, mutt." Jack didn't argue. He locked Coda in the laundry room. That night, the dog howled so loudly that neighbors called to complain, and Jack sat alone in silence, staring at the leash hanging by the door. At 1:13 a.m., Something changed. Jack opened. The laundry room. Coda didn't lunge for water or food. He walked straight past Jack, to Sarah's old office. A room Jack hadn't touched in 3 years. The shepherd pawed at the door, whining, crying. Jack's voice cracked. "What do you want? From me?" In a fit of rage, he knocked over a bottle of whiskey. It shattered on the floor. The scent filled the air. Coda backed away, but he never broke eye contact. That's when Jack saw it. Not fear, not anger, just sadness. And something else. Disappointment. The phone rang. "Agent Reynolds, we found Ethan's backpack. Miller's Creek. Blood, drag marks, signs of a struggle." When Jack turned back, the front door was wide open. Coda was gone. Hey, if this story has already pulled you in, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. These aren't just stories, they're tributes to the animals who risk it all when we need them most. Stay with us. It's just getting started. By sunrise, Coda had covered over 15 miles of wild terrain, bare-pawed, no handler, no food. Just instinct, pain, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. His trail led him to a place that even local hunters avoided. Devil's Backbone. An old mining site full of caves and legends. People said it was cursed. Coda didn't care. He found the bunker by scent, buried under branches and leaves. He clawed at the metal hatch, and inside, Ethan answered with a whisper. "Coda, I knew you'd find me." The boy reached his fingers under the door, trembling, and on the other side the dog pressed his nose against them, offering the only comfort he could. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He listened. Ethan told him everything, how a man wearing the same cologne as the one who hurt his mom had grabbed him, how they planned to move him that night. Coda snarled. Then he vanished into the dark. He found a vent just wide enough for his battered frame and disappeared inside. Back at FBI command, Agent Reynolds stared at a blinking signal on her laptop. The microchip in Coda's neck had just pinged again. Her voice shook. He found him. He found Ethan. Inside that bunker, as armed men paced the halls and whispered about midnight deadlines, one of them opened a door to deliver a meal. He never saw the blur coming. Coda lunged from the shadows, a fury of muscle and teeth. The tray clattered to the ground. The man screamed. The hallway filled with shouts and footsteps. In the chaos, Ethan slipped out, barefoot, shivering. He ran toward a storage room he'd seen before, toward a tiny window too small for a man, but maybe, just maybe, big enough for a boy. Coda followed. He crouched beneath it, motionless. "You want me to climb on you?" Ethan whispered. Coda didn't move. The boy scrambled onto his back, shoved the latch, and wriggled through. Cool air hit his face. Freedom. "Coda," he cried. "Come on." But the dog stayed behind. The window was too small. He barked once, soft and urgent. "I can't leave you," Ethan sobbed. Coda barked again, then turned toward the hallway. He was going to buy time. Ethan ran. He didn't look back. Ethan didn't stop running. Not when his bare feet scraped against broken sticks. Not when brambles sliced his legs open. Not even when his lungs burned and his body screamed for rest. Because behind him, deep in that bunker, was a dog who had just given everything to save him. Coda hadn't hesitated. He'd faced down armed men in a place built for secrets. And Ethan knew, deep down, the shepherd wasn't coming out unless someone helped him. But right now, Ethan had one job: survive. He stumbled through the woods until he saw headlights breaking, through the trees like salvation itself. A woman stepped into view, silhouetted in white. "Ethan?" she called gently. "Oh my God. Ethan Mitchell?" It took him a moment to recognize her. "Dr. Andrews?" he asked breathlessly. "Hunter, found me? He's still in there. They're going to hurt him." She held up her hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now," she said with a too soft smile. "Let me check you. Are you hurt?" Ethan stopped. Something was off. Then he caught it. The scent. That same cologne. the one the man who took him wore, the one that had clung to the house, the night his mom died, the one he'd smelled on the guards, on the one who whispered about midnight. "You smell like them," he said, backing away. Her smile faded. "What did you say?" "You're one of them." Her face went cold, but before she could move, there was a flash of motion, figures crashing through the trees. "Ethan!" A voice shouted. Ethan's eyes went wide. "Dad!" Jack Mitchell burst through the brush, soaking wet, gun drawn. Behind him were 2 FBI agents and Agent Reynolds, gun at the ready. "Step away from the boy," Reynolds commanded. Dr. Andrews hesitated. Her hand dropped to her bag, but she never reached it. Coda, bruised and bleeding, came out of nowhere, a missile of fur and fury. He crashed into her with full force, knocking the syringe from her hand. The shepherd stood over her, snarling. Reynolds moved fast, cuffing the woman before she could blink. Jack dropped to his knees and pulled Ethan into his arms, holding him like he never wanted to let go. "I knew you'd find me," Ethan whispered. And Jack, for the first time in years, cried. Back in Oak Ridge, word spread like wildfire. The Mitchell boy had been found, alive, and the dog, that dog, had led them to an underground trafficking ring operating under the radar for years. By morning, the police had raided the bunker. What they found inside was horrifying: holding cells, fake documents, medication logs, a list of names. But the ringleader? Gone. Thomas Blackwood, billionaire, community leader, founder of multiple youth outreach programs, had disappeared without a trace. His empire had crumbled overnight, but he'd slipped through the cracks, leaving only his foot soldiers to answer for what he'd built. And while the FBI began tearing through shell companies and fake charities across the East Coast, Ethan and Coda were rushed to the hospital. The waiting room at Oak Ridge Memorial was silent. Jack sat in the corner, hands still bloodied, his son asleep across his lap, wrapped in a warm blanket. Every few minutes, Ethan stirred and asked the same question. "Is Coda okay?" Jack would nod. "He's fighting, just like always." But truthfully, Coda was hanging by a thread. In the veterinary trauma wing, Dr. Patel, one of the best in the state, worked tirelessly to stabilize him. 2 gunshot wounds, lung trauma, internal bleeding, shock. "He shouldn't still be breathing," Patel muttered. But somehow, he is. Jack paced outside the operating room, heart in his throat. He knew why Coda was still fighting, because his job wasn't done yet. Later, that night, Ethan sat at Coda's side, softly stroking the shepherd's ear. "He always knew who hurt Mom," he whispered. Jack froze. "What do you mean?" "The man who took me, he wore the same cologne. And Dr. Andrews did too." Jack's breath caught. That scent, the one Sarah had noticed, the one she mentioned once when she said someone had been watching the house. "Ethan," went on. "Coda knew. He smelled it back then." Jack sat down beside his son. "He tried to tell us." "He tried everything," Ethan said, barely holding back tears. And Jack realized something else. Coda had never stopped working the case, not from day one. The next morning, Agent Reynolds returned with something strange in her hand. Coda's collar. "There's something inside," she said. A tech noticed it was thicker than standard. Carefully, they cut it open. Inside was a sealed micro SD card. Waterproof. Hidden. Jack stared. "He was carrying something this whole time?" Reynolds didn't answer. She was already handing it to her forensic team. Within hours, the contents were decrypted. Files, photos, audio recordings, notes. All of them traced back to Sarah Mitchell. Jack felt the air leave his lungs. Sarah had been documenting everything. Blackwood's programs, the offshore accounts, the shell companies. She'd known. She'd trained Coda to carry the data if something happened to her. Sarah had planned for this. Outside the hospital, Jack sat with Ethan and Coda, still unconscious, hooked, up to oxygen but stable. "Mom trained him," Ethan said. "She used to hide stuff in the backyard and say, 'Find the treasure, Coda.' Jack's heart skipped. She'd bury things? Ethan nodded. She said he could keep secrets better than people. Jack stood. We need to check the pond. The pond behind the Mitchell house didn't look like much, just a still pool under gray skies, a few cattails, a bench with peeling paint. But Coda stood there, weak but alert. Jack knelt down. Find the treasure, he said. Coda stepped into the water. Despite the pain, despite the bandages, the German shepherd swam to the center. Then dove. Minutes later, he emerged with a plastic waterproof case in his jaws. Jack caught it, trembling. Inside, documents, photos, a voice recorder. Then Coda dove again, and again, 5 cases total. When the last one hit the ground, he collapsed beside Jack's boots. Jack whispered, "You did it, boy, you really did it." Back in town, the cases rocked the investigation wide open. Bank transfers, files, voice recordings, all of it meticulously documented by Sarah in the months before her death. She had uncovered the entire network. Agent Reynolds flipped through, the contents, her voice shaking. This isn't just a case, this is the entire operation. Jack couldn't even speak. He just stared at the dog resting on the floor. Coda had carried the truth through fire and blood because Sarah had trusted him more than anyone. That night, Jack sat in the hospital kitchen with a cup of coffee and a sealed letter he found inside one of the pond cases. It was addressed simply, for Jack, Sarah's handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a letter dated 1 week before her murder. Jack, if you're reading this, something happened to me. I did everything I could to protect you and Ethan, but Blackwood is dangerous. I trained Coda to be more than a pet. He's a courier, a protector, a soldier. Trust him, Jack. Even when you can't. Trust yourself, you're stronger than you think. Love her, love him, and when the time is right, bury them with the truth. Sarah. Jack pressed the letter to his chest and wept, not out of pain, but because for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Sarah hadn't left them unprotected. She had lit a path, and Coda had followed it every single step. The next morning, Reynolds walked in with one final update. Blackwood made contact. Jack's jaw clenched. What? He wants a meeting. He's offering Ethan's safety in exchange for the original evidence. Jack stared at her. He thinks we haven't released it yet? He thinks we only have digital copies, she said. He doesn't know about the pond cases. Jack stood slowly. It's a trap. Reynolds nodded. We're going anyway. As FBI agents prepped gear, as tactical teams mapped out locations, Jack returned to Coda's side. He knelt beside the German shepherd. You've done more than anyone ever asked of you, but I might need you one more time. Coda opened his eyes just barely and let out a soft breath. It wasn't a bark, but it was enough. Jack placed his hand gently on the dog's neck. Let's finish what she started. The abandoned barn sat at the edge of a tobacco field long since surrendered to weeds and time. No streetlights, no cell reception, just a gravel road, a sagging tin roof, and the kind of silence that made your skin itch. Jack Mitchell stood at the threshold, heart hammering against his ribs. Dressed in plain jeans, a windbreaker, and hiking boots, he looked like any tired father, but under his jacket, strapped tight to his side, was a Glock and a wire that connected him to a tactical van parked 2 miles away. Through his earpiece, Agent Reynolds' voice was steady. Check in clear. You're live. We've got eyes. On the perimeter. If anything moves, we move. Jack swallowed hard. He didn't say a word. He stepped inside, and there he was. Thomas Blackwood, tailored suit, cufflinks, a smile that never reached his eyes. He looked out of place in the dust and rot, like someone had dropped a Wall Street banker into a horror movie set. You look tired, Jack, he said, arms spread in a mock welcome. Can't say I blame you. Raising a boy alone, tough gig. Jack didn't flinch. You wanted the evidence, I brought it. He held up a black briefcase filled not with Sarah's files, but copies. Enough to bait him. Blackwood's eyes glittered. And where's the dog? Jack's voice was flat. Recovering. He's done enough. Pity. I had a soft spot for him. Loyal creatures, German shepherds. Rare to find that in humans anymore. He stepped closer. And your son? Safe. Blackwood smirked. I hope so. Would be a shame to lose him too. That was the last line Jack needed to hear. From the rafters above, a red laser dot lit up on Blackwood's chest. FBI! A voice shouted from outside. Drop your weapon. Blackwood froze. Reynolds stepped into the doorway, gun raised. End of the line, Thomas. But he didn't reach for a weapon. He laughed, a low, bitter sound. You think this ends with me? We know it doesn't, Reynolds said. But it starts. Back at the safe house, Ethan lay on the couch, curled up, beneath a fleece blanket with Coda stretched out beside him. The dog's ribs rose and fell slowly. A fresh IV bag hung from a hook. Bandages wrapped his middle, but his eyes stayed on the door, like he knew Jack wasn't safe yet. Dr. Patel sat nearby, updating a chart. He's hanging in, she said softly. He's got more fight in him than most humans I know. Ethan ran his fingers gently along Coda's side. Don't worry, he whispered. Dad's coming back. And Coda, weak as he was, wagged his tail once. The news broke before sunrise. Local hero dog leads FBI to fugitive billionaire. Sarah Mitchell's evidence brings down national child trafficking ring. German shepherd uncovers. Hidden files. Saves boy and father. It was everywhere. Photos of Coda, Jack, and Ethan filled the headlines. People across the country sent letters, flowers, donations. Oak Ridge's tiny hospital was flooded with deliveries for a dog who couldn't read his own press, but somehow understood the love behind it. Jack didn't care about the media circus. He was thinking about the promise he'd made, to Sarah, to Ethan, to the dog who had never let go. 2 days after Blackwood's arrest, Jack brought Ethan back to the farmhouse. The air felt different, lighter somehow. Less like a grave, more like a place waiting to be lived in again. They ate grilled cheese sandwiches at the kitchen table. Jack read out loud from a dog-themed joke book someone had mailed. Ethan giggled at every terrible pun. Coda, wrapped in a blanket, dozed beside them. It was the first time they'd all been in the same room without fear choking the air. Later that night, Ethan sat beside his dad on the back porch. Do you think Mom knew? He asked. Knew what, buddy? That it was going to end this way, that she wouldn't make it. Jack stared out at the pond. I think she hoped she'd stop it in time, but yeah. I think she knew the risk. She didn't just leave files, did she? Ethan asked. She left instructions. For Coda. For us. Jack smiled faintly. She always had a plan. Ethan nodded. She told me once that Coda could smell lies. Jack laughed under his breath. She used to say that about you too. The next morning, Agent Reynolds showed up with donuts in a small wooden box. This was found under Coda's bed at the hospital, she said. It was hand-carved, smooth, no lock, etched on top, in delicate cursive. For Jack. Inside was a flash, drive and another letter. Sarah's voice played through a small recorder the same way it had in the pond case. Jack, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. But I need you to finish what I started. Don't let grief harden you. Let it break. You open instead. Let it make you real. You don't have to be perfect. Just present Coda will guide you. And Ethan, he'll teach you how to live again. Jack didn't cry this time. He just nodded and whispered, I will. 1 week later, Coda was finally well enough to walk. Slowly, stiffly, but on his own. The vet team clapped when he made it out to the garden. Ethan knelt down, hugging his neck. You did it, buddy. You really did it. The mayor of Oak Ridge declared the following Saturday Coda Day. Local kids held a parade with handmade signs. A bakery donated a cake shaped like a paw print, and inside the firehouse, Jack stepped up to a podium with Ethan by his side. He held up a custom tag. Always faithful. Forever family. He clipped it to Coda's collar. "Welcome to retirement, boy." The crowd burst into applause. Coda didn't bark. He just leaned into Jack's chest and closed his eyes. Back at the house, they had a quiet celebration of their own. Photos, cupcakes, a single candle. Agent Reynolds stayed late. She was being transferred to Seattle but didn't want to miss this. "You ever think about writing it all down?" she asked Jack. He nodded toward the couch, where Ethan was showing his homemade storybook to a new rescue pup they'd adopted. Cody, a clumsy black lab with giant ears. "I don't have to," Jack said. "He already is." That night, Jack sat beside the pond with Coda resting at his feet. He held a fresh letter in his hands, one he'd written that morning. "Sarah, you told me once that love doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. For a while, I couldn't see it. I was blind with guilt. But now I see it everywhere. In our son's eyes, in the dog you trained, in every step forward. We're okay. We're really okay. Thank you for lighting the way." Jack folded the letter and let it drift into the pond. Coda lifted his head to watch it sink, and then he laid it back down with a sigh. The farmhouse was quiet, too quiet. Jack Mitchell had learned to fear that kind of silence. The kind that settles right before something shatters. The kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It had been exactly 1 week since Thomas Blackwood's arrest. Coda, Ethan, and Jack had begun to rebuild something that resembled a life. The walls of the house no longer echoed grief. The television played old cartoons in the background. A casserole dish from the neighbors still sat warm on the counter. But tonight, something felt off. Jack lay on the couch, fully clothed. One arm wrapped around Ethan, who was fast asleep, his face buried in Jack's flannel shirt. Across the room, Coda rested on his blanket. His ribs still ached. His movement was slow, but his ears, those sharp, silent radar dishes, twitched. Then came the sound, glass shattering. Jack's eyes snapped open. In one motion, he pulled Ethan off the couch and rolled to the floor, pressing the boy behind the heavy armchair. Ethan stirred but didn't cry out, just like Jack had trained him. "Stay down," he whispered. Coda was already on his feet, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. The back kitchen window had been smashed. Footsteps creaked across the porch, slow, heavy, deliberate. Jack scanned the dark with his eyes, heart pounding in his throat. The power had been cut. No lights, no phone signal, only moonlight. And then the front door creaked open. Standing in the doorway was the one man Jack never expected to see again. Thomas Blackwood. Alive. Free. Holding a gun. "Well," he said casually, like they were old friends catching up. "You've got something that belongs to me." Jack's blood ran cold. "You're supposed to be in custody." Blackwood smiled. "Money buys many things, time, influence, even silence. Sometimes it buys freedom." He stepped inside. The hardwood creaked beneath his polished boots. Behind him was another figure, Dr. Sarah Andrews. She looked pale, drenched in sweat. Her vet bag clutched in front of her like a shield. Her face was twisted in fear, but not enough to stop her from being there. Jack stood slowly, shielding Ethan, keeping his body between them. "You're not taking him," Jack said. Blackwood raised the gun. "You think this is about him?" "No, Jack. This is about what your wife left behind. We know you found more than files. We want the rest, the backups, the originals." "You're too late," Jack said. "The FBI has everything." Blackwood's smile tightened. "They don't have everything." There were whispers. Sarah left more. Physical backups. She trusted that dog of hers more than any agent. And I think you know where they are. Jack stared him down. "You're wrong." "I don't think I am." Then, from behind the chair, a small voice broke the tension. "Daddy?" Blackwood's eyes shifted, gleamed like a predator spotting prey. "There he is," he whispered. "You should have kept him hidden." He raised the gun. Coda moved. It was a blur. Pure instinct, all muscle and fury. 1 second he was beside the fireplace. The next he launched into Blackwood with everything he had left. The gun went off. The two crashed into the wall. Dr. Andrews screamed and dropped to her knees. Blood seeped between her fingers. Jack dove for the weapon. Blackwood got there first. They fought, kicking, punching, grappling in the dark. The gun clattered across the floor. Coda, despite reopened wounds, lunged again, his jaws locking onto Blackwood's wrist just as the gun fired a second time. The bullet missed. Jack didn't wait. He drove a fist into Blackwood's jaw, then another, and another, until the man stopped moving, until silence returned. But it wasn't empty. It was full of something worse. Jack turned. Coda was down, blood pooling. Ethan screamed. "No, Coda!" Jack dropped to his knees, hands trembling. The shepherd's chest was rising, barely. "You did good, buddy," Jack whispered, stroking his fur. "You saved us. Again." Coda's tail gave one weak thump, then stilled. Ethan collapsed onto him, sobbing. "Don't go, please, don't go." Jack wrapped his arms around his son and the dog that had saved them all. Sirens howled in the distance, but they weren't fast enough. 15 minutes later, the house was swarming with emergency vehicles. FBI agents poured through every doorway. Blackwood, bruised and barely breathing, was cuffed and carried away. Dr. Andrews was rushed to the ambulance. She would live, though she'd never be free again. Agent Reynolds ran through the front door and froze at the sight of Coda. She grabbed her radio. "We need medevac. Canine trauma. Priority 1. A paramedic shook her head. "He's not stable enough to move." But Ethan stood, tears in his eyes, face streaked with blood and dirt, hands curled into fists. "Yes, he is." Reynolds knelt beside him. "Ethan." "He's not dying," Ethan said. "He's hiding." Reynolds blinked. "What do you mean?" "He's done this before. When it was dangerous. When he thought it wasn't safe. He's playing dead. Mom trained him that way. He's waiting." Jack met Reynolds' eyes. "She's right." Reynolds didn't hesitate. "Get that bird in the air. Now." The medevac team arrived within the hour. Coda was loaded onto a gurney, 2 IVs in his legs, blood pressure crashing. Ethan climbed into the chopper beside him, holding his paw the entire way. "You promised Mom you'd protect us," Ethan whispered. "You did that. Now I promise you, I'm going to get you home." At the Richmond Veterinary Trauma Center, the staff had already cleared 2 ORs. They'd stocked canine blood, canceled every other procedure. "He's critical," the lead surgeon said. "We've got massive trauma, lung collapse, internal bleeding, reopened sutures, shock. We'll do everything we can." Jack paced the waiting room, fists clenched, watching Ethan sleep in a nearby chair. Dr. Patel stood with him. "If he wasn't who he is," she said quietly, "I'd say he's gone. But I've never seen anything like him." Hours passed. The clock ticked like a war drum. And then the surgeon stepped into the room, peeling off bloody gloves. Jack stood, barely breathing. "How is he?" The man exhaled. "He's alive. We got him through surgery. But the next 24 hours, we'll be close." Jack nodded slowly. Ethan whispered from behind him, "He's still fighting, just like always." That night they were allowed into recovery. Coda lay motionless, wrapped in clean bandages, oxygen tube in place, monitors beeping steadily. Ethan stepped forward first. Coda opened his eyes, just a little. "Hi, buddy," Ethan whispered. "We're safe now." The dog gave a faint whine. Ethan knelt beside him and rested his hand on his head. "You're not done yet." Across town, FBI agents began raiding Blackwood's remaining shell companies and properties. They recovered more files, rescued more kids, shut down more safe houses, and then from Dr. Andrews, now lucid and terrified, came a full confession. She had helped hide Sarah's murder. She had scrubbed files, hidden medical records, but she hadn't pulled the trigger. "Blackwood," she said, eyes down. "He was the one. He came to the house. He said Sarah had to stop asking questions." Reynolds looked at her, cold and exhausted. "You helped him cover it up." Andrews nodded, crying. I was scared, I'm sorry. Reynolds didn't flinch. Tell it to the jury. Back in the ICU, Jack sat beside Coda's kennel, whispering, You never gave up. Not once. Not when Sarah died. Not when I fell apart. Not when we locked you away. You just waited. You waited until we were ready to listen. The dog stirred. Jack pressed his hand gently to Coda's ribs. We're listening now. The sun was just rising over the Blue Ridge Hills when Coda took his first unaided step. His legs trembled and his chest heaved with every breath, but he moved forward anyway, one paw at a time, steady and determined. Jack stood nearby with a lukewarm cup of hospital coffee in one hand and a leash in the other. He didn't need the leash. He just needed to be there. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor in the recovery unit, his eyes wide. You're doing it, he whispered. Good boy. Coda paused, looked at the boy he'd nearly died for, and let out a soft huff. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't strength, but it was enough. Behind them, Dr. Patel stood with her clipboard in hand. She didn't write anything, she just watched. He's healing faster than I expected, she murmured. Strong will, strong heart. Jack gave a tired smile. He always had more heart than the rest of us combined. The world outside that recovery room didn't stop spinning. By now, the Blackwood case had exploded onto national headlines. Every major news network in the country was covering the story. The Mitchell evidence, as they called it, was fueling raids and arrests across the East Coast. Blackwood, now in federal custody with no chance of bail, was being moved to a maximum security facility in West Virginia. The footage of his arrest played on a loop. The tailored suit, the handcuffs, the blood still on his collar from Coda's final charge. Dr. Sarah Andrews remained in a medical holding facility, recovering from her injuries and awaiting trial. Agent I. Reynolds had told Jack in private, There's a slim chance she might get some leniency, not forgiveness, but maybe redemption. She cooperated, gave names, helped us piece things together. Jack didn't answer. He didn't have the energy to care. All he could think about was the German shepherd slowly regaining the strength to walk again. A few days later, Jack and Ethan were packing up their overnight bags to return home. They'd spent nearly 3 weeks sleeping on hospital chairs, visitor couches, and in one case, a beanbag that permanently ruined Jack's back. One of the nurses stopped them in the hallway holding a wooden box. Mr. Mitchell, we found this under Coda's bed. The FBI team picked it up when they were reviewing the hospital room. Jack took it gently. It was smooth, simple, unmarked, except for one detail. For Jack Sarah's handwriting. His hands shook as he opened the lid. Inside were 2 items, a sealed envelope and a small digital recorder. He sat down on a bench by the elevators and pressed play. Sarah's voice came through soft and steady like she was just in the next room. Jack, if you're hearing this, something happened to me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. I thought I had more time. I was building something, a case, yes, but also a path back to you. I know how you retreat into silence, how you carry guilt like armor. That's why I trained Coda, not just to protect Ethan, but to bring you back if you ever lost yourself. Jack closed his eyes, fighting the lump in his throat. There's a light in you. I saw it the first time you tripped over your own feet, at that diner in Asheville. Don't let that light go out. Not for me. Not for the past. Love him, Jack. Raise him to believe in justice, not revenge. You don't have to be perfect. Just present. And trust the dog, Jack. He's smarter than all of us. The tape ended with a quiet click. Jack sat there for a long moment, head bowed, heart full of both peace and pain. That night back at the farmhouse, everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The shadows weren't as dark. Quiet didn't feel hollow. Jack had spent days clearing out Sarah's office, not erasing her, but honoring her. He framed her journalism awards and placed a photo of her and Ethan on the mantel. The dusty liquor bottles were gone, replaced by books, art supplies, and half-finished Lego kits. Every evening, they cooked together, sometimes grilled cheese, sometimes scrambled eggs. Coda got a chair at the table, of course. They were still healing, but they were together. One morning, as the first snow of the season dusted the porch, Jack found Ethan standing by the sliding glass door in his pajamas, cradling a mug of hot chocolate. Coda sat beside him, tail swaying lazily. "Thinking?" Jack asked. Ethan nodded. "Just remembering." "Anything in particular?" Ethan took a sip, then glanced up. "Do you think Mom knew she was going to die?" Jack didn't speak right away. "I think she knew the danger, but she hoped she could stop it in time." Ethan stared out at the pond. "She didn't just leave evidence," he said. "She left instructions. She told Coda what to do. She trusted him more than anyone, even more than you." Jack didn't take offense. He smiled. She was usually right. Later that week, Agent Reynolds stopped by the farmhouse. She looked different without the windbreaker and holster, just jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt. Human, tired, grateful. She brought a box of donuts and a file folder. "The files Sarah kept. They're changing everything," she said. "Dozens of arrests, seized assets, testimonies from kids who are finally getting justice." She set down the folder and picked up a cup of coffee. "Your wife didn't just stop a criminal, she cracked a system." Jack glanced at the recorder. "On the table. She always did," he said. Reynolds smiled. "Give that dog a medal," she added, nodding at Coda snoozing on the rug. "He's getting one." Jack replied. "Saturday, firehouse, small ceremony." "You inviting press?" "Just the people who matter." That Sunday, the three of them, Jack, Ethan, and Coda, visited Sarah's grave. Fresh flowers had already been left there by strangers. A small, stuffed animal sat nestled beside the headstone. Ethan added his own, a bundle of wild daisies wrapped in twine. They stood together, the wind rustling through the trees. Jack stepped forward first. "I used to come here and feel nothing but guilt," he said. "I blamed myself. I blamed Coda. I shut down." He looked at Ethan. "But you brought me back, then at Coda, and you never gave up on me." Coda didn't move. He didn't need to. Jack knelt down and rested a hand on the grave. "I promise you, Sarah, I'm going to raise him right. I'm going to give him the life you dreamed of. And when he asks about you, I'll tell him the truth, all of it, even the hard parts." Ethan stood beside him and leaned his head on Jack's shoulder. "She already knows you were brave," Jack whispered. "Now he'll know you were brilliant, and kind, and funny, and real." Coda sat between them, silent, but present. A witness to everything. Back at the house, Ethan pulled a worn notebook from his backpack and handed it to Jack. "What's this?" "My story," he said. "I'm writing it all down, for other kids, so they know they're not alone." Jack opened the first page. In neat, careful handwriting it read, "My name is Ethan Mitchell. I was taken, but I was never truly lost, because someone always believed in me, because a dog named Coda never stopped looking, and because my mom left behind a map. This is our story." Jack looked up, heart swelling with pride. "You're brave," he said. "I had help," Ethan replied, glancing at Coda. The dog wagged his tail. 1 year later, the farmhouse looked different, not because of the new paint or the front porch swing, but because the air itself felt lighter, like someone had cracked open the windows and let life back in. The garden Jack and Ethan planted now bloomed with wildflowers and vegetables. A tire swing hung from the oak tree out back, and on the living room wall, framed between a family photo and a crayon drawing of Coda, was Sarah Mitchell's Journalism Award. It had been exactly 365 days since Coda was discharged from the trauma center, since the tape of Sarah's final message played, since the world found out what one woman, a father, a boy, and a battered dog could do when they refused to back down. Today wasn't just any day. Today was Coda's retirement ceremony. The Oak Ridge firehouse had never seen a turnout like this. Rows of folding chairs were filled with neighbors, first responders, school teachers, and even a few federal agents who had flown in just for the occasion. A handmade banner stretched across the wall. "Thank you, Coda. You saved us all." Jack adjusted his tie at the podium while Ethan stood, beside him, proudly holding Coda's leash. The shepherd sat alert at their side, chest puffed out, his coat now sleek and healthy. He wore a new vest, navy blue with gold lettering. Retired. Still a hero. Jack cleared his throat and leaned into the microphone. "I'm not much of a speech guy," he began, "but I've got to try." The crowd quieted. "A year ago, my son went missing. My wife had already been taken from us. I thought that was the end of our story, but it wasn't. It was just the beginning." Jack glanced at Coda, who gave a soft huff in return. "This dog didn't just bring Ethan home. He brought me home, too. He carried the weight of our grief, our fear, and our hope, and he never let it crush him." He paused. "Sarah trained him for this. She believed in him when I didn't believe in anything, and in the end he proved her right, every single step of the way." Jack reached into a small wooden box and pulled out a tag, clipped onto a leather collar. He read the inscription aloud, "Always faithful, forever family." He knelt down and clipped the tag to Coda's collar. The crowd stood and erupted in applause. Coda didn't bark. He didn't move. He just leaned into Jack's chest and closed his eyes. That evening, the Mitchells hosted a backyard cookout. Just close friends, burgers on the grill, lemonade on the table, and a cooler full of ice cream bars for the neighborhood kids. Ethan showed off his homemade storybook to anyone who asked. He'd even printed a few extra copies and passed them out like treasure. Agent Reynolds stayed late. She was headed to a new field office in Oregon, but made the trip back just for this. "You ever think about turning this into a real book?" she asked Jack, sipping sweet tea under the porch light. Jack nodded toward Ethan. "I don't have to. He already did." Reynolds smiled, then looked at Coda, lying peacefully under the picnic table. "You ever think he knew how big this would get?" Jack chuckled. He didn't care. He just knew Ethan needed him. Later that night, when the grill had cooled and the last sparkler had fizzled out, Jack found himself back at the pond. Coda lay beside him, his head resting on Jack's boot, breathing slow and deep. The stars shimmered in the water, and fireflies blinked across the field like tiny lanterns. Jack pulled a folded letter from his back pocket. He'd written it that morning. "Sarah, you told me once that love doesn't vanish, it just changes form. For a long time, I thought I'd lost you. But now I know. I was just learning to see you in new ways, in Ethan's laugh, in Coda's courage, in the silence between heartbeats when everything feels like it might fall apart, and then doesn't. We're okay now. We're really, truly okay. I wish you could have seen today. I think you would have laughed at how much Ethan talked. I think you would have hugged Coda for a full minute, and I think you'd be proud of what we became. Thank you for not letting the darkness win. Thank you for loving us in a way that kept working even after you were gone." He folded the letter and placed it into a small wooden box he had carved himself. Then he let it float across the pond, just like her first letter had. This time the wind didn't fight it. It carried it gently to the water's edge. Coda lifted his head, watched it drift, then let out a soft breath. Jack reached down and stroked his back. "Rest, old friend. You've earned it." Over the next few months, life moved at its own quiet pace. Ethan started 4th grade. He joined the school newspaper and published his first article, "How My Dog Saved the World and Me." Jack began volunteering at the local animal shelter, helping rehabilitate dogs with trauma, just like Coda once had. He even adopted another rescue, a clumsy golden retriever named Cody, who chased his tail and knocked over everything in sight. Coda approved, though he did roll his eyes, if dogs could roll their eyes. The farmhouse settled into a new rhythm. Dinner at 6 homework after. Bedtime stories told in low voices while Coda lay curled at the foot of Ethan's bed. On the anniversary of Sarah's passing, they held a small memorial by the pond. No speeches, no cameras, just music, candles, and 3 people who understood the cost of truth. Ethan read from his journal. My mom used to say that love isn't something you lose. It's something you grow into. At first I didn't understand that, but now I do. Because every time I look at Coda, I see her love. Every time I laugh with Dad, I feel it. Love doesn't die, it just changes shape. Jack placed a small wooden carving beside the bench, a German shepherd with angel wings. Beneath it, a simple plaque, Sarah Mitchell, mother, wife, warrior. She lit the path. We followed the light. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed and the candles had gone out, Jack stood on the porch, arms crossed over his chest. He looked out at the dark horizon, then down at Coda curled up at his feet. You're a miracle, he said. Not because you saved him, not even because you saved me, but because you never once gave up. Coda opened his eyes, blinked slowly, then settled back into sleep. Thank you for following this journey from the first bark to the final breath of peace. Thank you for believing in the bond between a boy, a father, and the dog who carried them, both through the storm. This story wasn't just about danger or darkness, it was about endurance, loyalty, family, and hope. Now we'd love to hear from you. If your dog tried to lead you somewhere, would you follow them without question? Or, have you ever had a pet that understood you better than most people ever could? Drop your answers in the comments. We'll be reading them all. And if Coda's story touched your heart, please share this video, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true stories of love, bravery, and second chances. From all of us, thank you.